Hello, Michael.
There you are.
Hello. There. Hey,
Hello.
Steve.
Mr.
I can hear
Frankish.
Steve now.
Mr. Frankish, you appear to be on set.
Well,
Oh, Michael too, terrific. Oh, I didn't get my people in to build me a background this morning.
Yeah, where are those set people? They should have been here by now.
Yeah, where are they? The dog's here.
Excellent.
They're out with having their temperatures taken outside. It's a little slow.
Okay. Okay, well, where have you got to?
we haven't gotten anywhere yet.
Yeah, yeah.
That's always the bloody way, isn't it, till I turn
That's
up?
right. That's right.
Look,
Well, should we get started? Is everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent.
we're here.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank you so
We
much
called
for
this meeting.
thank you so much for joining us because we have three people here who are basically the American creative team for Max Headroom. We have producer Brian Frankish and writers Steve Roberts and Michael Cassutt with us. Thank you so much for your time. When was the last time the three of you got together to talk about Max like this?
I think it was probably the day they cancelled the show, wasn't it?
I think so.
Probably the last time we're actually together, yes. Although when they had the Museum of Television event, which I remember as being about year 2000, I think we were all there. Although I don't recall that we sat around and chatted because it was just a little bit scattered.
That
So,
was
yeah.
was that the on stage thing
Yes.
where Rocky Morton turned up and claimed to have created everything that Max ever did?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
that one. And
That one, yes.
I remember that. Yeah, it's probably the only time that I actually wished I was carrying a sidearm.
and I was in the audience because
You were.
they
Absolutely.
deemed that I wasn't creative enough to share the stage with the rest of you geniuses.
Whoa.
So-
That's right.
And so
I-
But yes, we voted on that, Brian.
I will note that I was in the audience too. So
So it was a very strange.
but I do remember that people kept fielding questions to me in the audience.
They did.
Well,
Yeah.
they knew what you knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the
How do we do
creative
that,
people
Frankie?
don't know shit, you see. We just make stuff up. Brian actually knows how to do this. We just invent it as we go along, but he's the man you ask if you want to know how to pull it off.
and then you go back and redo it so you can actually do it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But you know, it was an interesting proposition when everybody showed up in the same room for the first time, and then getting to that same room for the first time was an interview process. I remember I interviewed with Peter Wag and Phil Daguerre, and it was I believe it was December or November or something like that of '87 or something like that.
86.
No, 86. And and I was getting ready to catch a plane a couple of days because I was on my way to Rome to do to be the studio for a picture with Liza Minnelli and Burt Reynolds called Rent-A-Cop, and they were shooting at Cinecittà. And in those days we had phones on the back of the seat in front of us that would ring and you could answer them. And somewhere east of Chicago, this phone rang and I picked it up and it was Edward O'Denault, you know, the Eddie Denault.
Sure, Laura Martin. Yeah.
He was saying, hey, Ryan, well, that interview didn't go very well for you. So you're free to go and figure out what you want to do. These guys haven't picked up the phone and said, we want Frankish. So have a good time in Rome. I said, thanks, Eddie. I hung up the phone. And I was in Rome, and about 4 or 5 days later at what was it, about 3 o'clock in the morning, the phone in the hotel room rang, and it was Wag going, Frankish, you know, don't believe what Eddie Denault said. When can you get out here? And so in a couple of weeks, I was back in Los Angeles, you know, staring at, well, I was sitting there with Wag in his office, and in another room, there was this bearded gentleman by the name of Roberts, who was pounding away at a word processor, and things just started to begin. At that time, it was I understood that we were trying to get on the air, and this was like in January, I think. And everybody turned around and says, we've got to be on the air by March 27th. And I went,
Right.
You're shitting me.
From a standing start with 6 episodes.
Right.
Well, but no, 2 episodes.
Oh, it's just 2.
That's all you had. You had the pilot and no, you had 3: pilot, Rakers, and
Body Banks?
Body Banks, was it?
yeah.
War?
So.
Oh, no, I tell you, it's probably War. Because
What's a war? Wait a minute. In the sequence.
Okay, we lost him now.
I think he's getting some more props.
I think so.
Well, we were writing 6 episodes at the time.
Yeah, you were writing six episodes, but you had episodes 1, 2, and 3. Except when we started, they were 1, 3, and 2, like that, because you changed, episode 2 and 3 around, if you remember.
Yes.
After we had shot them, and really f***ed up the continuity in a lot of shit that we already shot.
Well, yes, Security Systems was originally supposed to be 6, and War was supposed to be 4. Then War wound up being 6. Security Systems moved up. Rakers and Body Bags shifted. The Blanks was the other one.
Yeah.
I think stayed right where it was.
Was there a story behind why it got rearranged?
Nothing, within a week, we'd hired a production designer and started throwing some shit together. And I walked up to Eddie Denault's office and I said, look, I'm going to need 3 stages now, and I'm going to need 2 construction crews. I mean, I've got to work a straight time in a graveyard, just around the clock, just to get this thing built to go in time. I've got to get shooting now, and if I'm going to make the 27th, it was really bitch, and it was unprecedented. As a matter of fact, and at the same time, in this prep, I found myself throwing Roberts and Wag into the car and giving them a tour of Los Angeles, because
from which I have never recovered, I might say.
I was just going to ask.
They turned to me and they said, having just come from the Becton Gas Works, they said, "Where's the architecture? What is this Los Angeles anyway? Isn't there any architecture here?" I say, I'm terribly sorry, but there were the Tudors weren't raised here, and I ended up driving them down into the LA River and through East Los Angeles and through every old building and anything that I could find. And believe me, we used them all. The Deco buildings in downtown Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But we had to piecemeal the whole show because there were no long streets of ancient architecture in Los Angeles. After all, most of it's built after World War II, and
it's impressive.
Not that it actually took part in World War II, you understand.
Well, we were fortunate. We didn't have the Blitz get this far.
That's right.
Yeah.
It is interesting that you guys can maintain that kind of cohesion with the sets, because as we were talking, every time we're looking at a new location, we're like, oh yeah, this Art Deco design here is pretty consistent, and like I can't imagine that was at all easy.
Well, it wasn't, as a matter of fact. Just to find Theora's bedroom was down in Long Beach, as a matter of fact. It was a huge hotel lobby of a building that had been built in the 20s that was all cement, and it was being torn down, as a matter of fact. It was about to be torn down. But we got in there in time to actually create the bedroom and then shoot it. We also, in that same building, found the Rakers swimming pool.
Oh.
Interesting. I love that.
at the same time, we were searching how are we going to do Rakers, and found the first guy who was really was building and operating motorized skateboards.
Yes.
With little wicks, little kind of long extended little things you could turn that controlled the carburetors on these little engines on them. But I remember, as a matter of fact, also in that situation, we changed cinematographers. We started out with one cinematographer through the pilot, and it was a little too vanilla. And
Not very Ridley.
well, but then you guys all got together and said, "Gee, wouldn't it be neat if we had a little more cutting edge of a cinematographer?" And we hired Paul. I can't remember his name. And I remember walking into the Rakers swimming pool with him, and he was saying, "Just get me some 3-foot stick-up fluorescents, okay? Battery powered, whatever. Just stick one here and stick one there and stick one there." And I went, "Oh, okay, this is different. We're not bringing a 5K in at the end of the thing and putting 9 pounds of gel on the front of the damn thing. Just boom, 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 bang, shoot." It was refreshing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, this is you're kind of getting at this right here, but production on TV these days is so different than it was in the 80s, and I'm kind of wondering like what a typical work day for all three of you was like. Did you guys work closely together, or were you mostly kind of separated and then would touch base occasionally?
I was always running in front of people, preparing sets that were going on in the future, and those two gentlemen were chained to desks.
Yeah.
In the production office, which I think was it was. You see that sign right there?
Mm-hmm.
That was hanging over the front production office.
Right.
But they were writing like mad, and I was getting these pages and working with the art department and the directors that were coming up, and also Mr. Wag, about getting sets after we'd broken down the sets that we needed and the order of shots that we were going to shoot them, and also trying to work out what he wanted to do to put a little bit extra into it. And so they devised going to San Francisco, to the shipyard in San Francisco, for a 2-day exterior to cover 4 shows, and that was interesting.
We didn't. The answer to the question is everyone was separate. Mike and I were slaving away. Actually, I think I was still using a typewriter at the time. I hadn't worked out computers, and I think Michael was very advanced. He was on a word processor of some sort, weren't you, Michael?
Yes, when basic.
Yeah, and that was
Scriptor.
Scriptor. Oh, is that what it was? Well, anyway, wherever it was, we were stuck there, drinking whiskey and smoking cigarettes. Actually, that bit of the writer's task isn't true, but we were stuck. And Brian was having all the fun. He was running around trying to prevent catastrophe all over California.
Kept trying to realize what people were screaming at me. Well, let's do this. Okay,
Yeah, I felt I was fairly divorced from production, and having come on off Twilight Zone, where I was working for Phil DeGuerre, I'd been, when you were a writer on that, even though I was a junior writer, literally a staff writer, I was on the set every time something I was writing was being produced. But I rarely got to the set. Rarely, I got to production meetings on a couple of scripts I was doing. But yes, my job, as I recall, was sitting there trying to, turn various people's drafts, like Rakers, I did a lot of rewriting on. War, Steve and I did a tremendous amount of rewriting on to just make them max. I mean, just in the early going. And that's all I would be doing from, 10 to 7 every day, is sitting in an office somewhere near Steve and Peter. And I knew Frankish, but I don't think we had many conversations. I would see him in a crowd because he was always in motion. He basically It's like one of those, time lapse pictures or something. Everybody else would have been standing still, and he would have been going.
Right. It's like a new descending staircase painting in action, but it's Brian Frankish making Max Headroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was trying to catch up with an impossibility. I mean, Brian, how Brian ever pulled this off, nobody, frankly, ever knows. I mean, there were miracles at work somewhere, but our problem was similar as far as we had to deliver stuff. And the truth was, I think I mentioned when we talked before, Heather and Austin, that Michael was the only guy who could do Max. I mean, it's a very curious thing to say, but it's very difficult stuff to write unless you're slightly insane or Swiss. And fortunately, Michael's both. So, he was able to pull this off. But we were getting stuff in, which are the best in the world, apart from the one by George R.R. Martin, who you might have heard of. Apart from his, everybody else had to be completely rewritten. And this was perfectly normal. I mean, this is unusual in television anyway, but it was desperate for us because we need to get the pages to Brian and couldn't get them there. So we didn't have time to leave the room, basically.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons, just since we mentioned the obscure Mr. Martin, one of the reasons the kind of order of scripts changed is because George had written an outline that was supposed to be in the sequence for a show called Mr. Meat that somewhere in the studio and certainly at ABC caused great consternation and wound up being put on the shelf. So not only did we have a hole in the schedule, a new script had to be written by Steve to fit the initial 6 episodes. And so at the same time, you're trying to shape all the other episodes into producible, preferable scripts, which we almost never did. On some kind of schedule, Steve had to write a new one, which, it's the kind of thing that takes a bit of time. So that was what was going on for our side.
Some interesting things did happen while we were involved in all of this script tour. And because it dealt with, elements and characters that came to life out of just, shooting the shit with each other or grabbing a beer, for 3 seconds as we passed each other quickly. When Rick Shaw appeared, and in one, pulling an actual rickshaw, and then in the next episode it was motorized, but then all of a sudden those episodes got changed, and now all of a sudden he regressed, and how do we get around that and things like that. And then they developed on the what was it? What was the opposing networks? 66 or something.
Oh, yeah, 66.
We were Network 23, and those networks, 66 was one. 69, I think, got frowned on by the network as usual.
Of course.
But what was Grossberg's network?
Well, that was Network 23. He was...
No.
That's right. He went to somebody
66.
else.
66 was his later... Yeah.
Well, I think Wag was sitting around with me as they were brainstorming this thing, and he said, "Got to get a name of a character for this evil head of the studio," and he said, "What's good? What's good?" And one of my great friends in this business and one of my mentors was Jack Grossberg, and I happened to mention I think Grossberg would be a good one. And he went, "Yeah, that's it. Let's go. Let's go there." And we would do this. We would throw our friends into the story as we went along, and it was
kind of also the one of the evil characters was a Chinese gentleman, and we had no idea what to call him. And we were driving along, and I looked up and saw a sign which I truly didn't understand, because in the UK these signs don't exist. And the sign said Pedzing, which I learnt was pedestrian crossing. But we called the character Pedzing right away. And I mean that's how this stuff evolved.
That was on Admiralty Way in Marina Del Rey that you saw that sign.
I believe you're right.
I like that you know the exact location. That's great.
Yeah, well, this is the sort of stuff Frankish does know. I promise you. He probably knows what car we were in at the time.
Well, I love that you guys mentioned Rick, because I was sitting here thinking about Rick as a character who, I mean, he's super memorable, great scenes with him. And then he seems to have popped up in some movies that were made after that, did the Wachowskis ever mention anything about the design of their Morpheus character kind of looking a whole lot like Rick?
News to me.
News to me, yeah.
Yeah. Perhaps worth
Interesting.
looking into just for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like they might have seen Max Headroom, perhaps.
Well, if they didn't, I don't know who they are, because they would have been the perfect age to have
Yeah.
Yeah.
had that land on them.
But I did spend,
Michael will correct me if I'm wrong here, or Brian. One of them can. I think the first show we pulled 20 million, and the last show we pulled 12 million. Nowadays, you'd be made president if you pulled 12 million for anything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a 5-season deal after that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, but that was, well, when we premiered our first 6 episodes in the spring, March 27th, we had all the interest and hype and promotion and a perfect time slot. So we did fairly well in those first 6 episodes. And then they, as networks do, and we made fun of this in the next 6 episodes or 7 episodes we did, they moved us to a time slot opposite Dallas and the new Miami Vice. Yeah, that I picked up that cover. I picked that up at the newsstand on Van Nuys Boulevard as I was driving to Culver City. I picked it up on my birthday.
It was the first time I asked my parents to get me a Newsweek was that came out.
My parents subscribed to Newsweek, and we got that one.
Yeah.
April 20th,
Yeah.
1987.
There you go.
Nice.
And which means it was available on April 13th. So that's how I remember picking it up. And I'm thinking, wow, this TV stuff was a lot of fun. I didn't realize I'd peaked on April 13th, 1987. But,
And also, I should say, happy belated birthday.
yes, thank you.
I do remember that from your Wikipedia and meant to
Yeah, there we
mention
go.
something.
Yes, there we are, all
Wow.
all of it. I have a copy of that too. So as
How,
one should, but yeah.
How many more have you got coming up, Michael?
Birthdays?
Yeah.
Hope a few. I don't know. Is this my last one? Is there something the great Barracuda?
Yeah, you're doing better. I'm looking at this and looking at Frankish and I and thinking those boys haven't got more than a week. You still look like you're about 25.
His thing hasn't gone off yet to indicate that he's almost 30, so he's still got a little more time.
Yeah, well, we'll just see. It's a contest I hope to win, depending what the prize is. But you know, genetics and growing up in Wisconsin, where there was a lot of beer, not drinking a lot of beer as a youth.
I should point out, by the way, that although we haven't collectively been together over the years, we have individually, because I see Brian a lot, and Mike and I get together whenever COVID stops us getting into a bar. So
yes.
we do still communicate a lot.
Right.
Yes.
And Matt Frewer, for that matter. I see Matt up here. I'm up in the Pacific Northwest. And as you know, Matt lives just up the road here. But again, COVID, he's over the border in Canada, and we can no longer get to each other on these trips.
Yes.
Yeah, I suspect.
So something that I need to ask while I have you all here, anybody who's listened to any other episode of this program knows that I'm completely like wild about this. I love that this happens. Brian mentioned Theora's bedroom. And what I would really like to know is who decided and why that she parks her car in her house.
I can't take credit for that at all, although I love it.
It was always thus. It was because she lived originally, I think, in the UK. She lived in a warehouse. So she would park her car in the corner of the warehouse where her bed happened to be. It was all part of being Blade Runner-ish, wasn't it? That's what we were all doing, to be frank.
Okay.
And that made sense to us completely.
I've been fascinated by it from the very outset. I was just like, she parks in her house. How does she even?
Yeah. Well, and I always attributed it to this kind of like music video logic of kind of like driving into the bedroom kind of thing. But as it continued in the show, I was like, oh no, it's more of like a utilitarian thing. So.
Well, I mean, the vehicles had so much to do with the style and the look. from the old Studebakers,
Yeah.
you know, to the big time bus.
Yes.
The big time bus.
You know, and we were always talking about, well, put the wheels back on the bus, you know, and even Edison Carter and how he was totally mobile all the time. You know, it just had to do with having unusual vehicles. And wasn't Randy Peters our coordinator, our transportation coordinator?
Yeah, he was, Randy. Yeah,
and he was very good at this because I would work with Randy. I met Randy on Brainstorm, and then we had worked together again on a picture called In the Mood, Phil Robinson's first picture, which was another period picture. And nowadays, when you make a motion picture, you hired a picture car coordinator, you know, and he gets paid a lot of money and he hires a lot of people, but no, Randy did it all, and he did a beautiful job, and people really liked the unusually, you know, insane things he showed up with, you know, for vehicles.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he would also have to end up with these big petty bone skip loaders that would help load our sets into buildings that were inaccessible, you know, so to speak. He'd have to build roads down beaches and so on and so forth to get things. I mean, and he was, you know, he was younger than all of us, thank God.
At the beginning.
Yes, he probably aged 5 years for every year he was on Max.
Isn't that how that always works? I am just constantly fascinated by what you got away with on this show, like things that you've snuck into the background. I feel like there's little references to like the Church of the Subgenius, or there's mannequins in the backgrounds of shots that are doing some very interesting things with each other or to each other, depending on your point of view. And even, you know, as someone who's seen this several times, I'll catch a little something in the background where I'm like, how did they get away with that? Is there something that when you think about the show that you're like pretty proud of being able to get into an episode, or you're like, wow, this is such an excellent opportunity that nobody noticed this, that is speaking to an audience somewhere else?
Oh boy, that's a cultural question. What we got away with on screen is one thing, and that would be a lot to do with hints possibly in the teleplay, but also a lot to do with whoever was directing it and had caught the sense of humor.
And also Leslie Frankenheimer was the set decorator.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right. So yeah. But we had that same cultural problem with everything. I mean, standards and practices would turn up, you know, and start arguing about what we were allowed to put into a screen. I mean, I've actually had a conversation where I've said, I'll trade you 2 fucks in Act 3 for a bugger in Act 1. I mean, it's ludicrous. They used to do this shit. So anything you could get away with, you know, that they didn't have time to involve themselves in was a little bonus. So I guess a lot of it was mischief.
Mm-hmm. I can also say regarding standards and practices is that one of my jobs at CBS had been in standards and practices before I became a writer. And so I was not only aware of where you could push and how you could manage them, but I believe the guy at ABC I believe it was Jim Berg was his name, certainly the head of it. He was a former colleague of mine from that world before he'd moved over. And so it was not to say that I played him or encouraged Steve to play him, but I had a real sophisticated view of what would work and what wouldn't, and what was likely to trigger and what stage of the process it was likely to trigger. And I will tell you that, yes, generally by the time you got to the set and mannequins having sex in the background, it was past the point where they could actually do much about it without actually taking the show off the air.
Yeah. Which of course they eventually did anyway.
Well, yes, they had the last laugh.
And that's because they realized what it was about. I mean, it was about them and their idiocy. Yeah.
Well, the whole show, the whole concept of the show, when we're at the post group, you know, at 4 o'clock in the morning, trying to get to a satellite link, you know, in 24 hours, we're so far behind in the post production of this, making up stuff with Bruno George,
Bruno,
inventing visual effects in an era that was just beginning to realize what they were, trying to figure out how to put this character of Max Headroom inside a computer, you know, and there's this guy sitting outside sweating on a bench who wasn't allowed in the room. And he was the gentleman from Standards Practices. And I turned to Peter and I said, why is this guy sitting out here sweating? He said, well, I think it's because he realizes that what we're doing is we're satirizing his bosses. And they're terrified of what we're going to say about them, you know, because we're really, you know, George Coe is them.
Oh my God. I had so much fun writing the Network 23 boardroom. Whenever I wrote that, it was a dream for me because I had been in that boardroom.
Right.
I'd been the little guy in a blue jacket down at the far end, but with big ears. So,
as a young person watching this too, you know, so much TV was so boring and so derivative and whatnot. And so I'm like flipping through the channels, watching Moonlighting one night, and this comes on, and I instantly kind of clicked with it, where I was like, this is anarchist, this is punk rock, this is, you know, anti-corporate. You know, something about it just kind of spoke to me in this way, where I was like, there's all this fake stuff around me, and this is the one thing that's kind of like saying, hey, the emperor has no clothes. And as a young snotty teen, that felt like, yes, this is for me.
Well, it's a pity that we are not able to do it today, because boy, the material that we have on mainstream, you know, to attack mainstream media today is
with
incredible.
phones and iPads
writers would
and
just
things.
have an absolute ball if they were allowed to go free and show these assholes who they really are today. But
it's the perfect mechanism for now.
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
But I can tell you, it's never going to happen. And we have had people of enormous financial clout look into this. People who really wanted to do more Max Headroom, and the legal problems that exist, where everybody claims that they, you know, are it, own it, invented it, created it. The whole thing is.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
I'm Max Headroom. No, I'm Max Headroom.
Yeah, I mean, and it's absurd because you know, Max did not come into the world ready-made. He turned up in London as a chaotic idea with nowhere to go, a script that was a pile of old crap, according to the producer and the director, and then how the hell do we save it? And similarly, money had been found to make it, but nobody had anything to make. And nobody created Max Headroom. It was a huge team, and that team, you know, began in London and continued here. Max evolved all the time. Nobody ever thanks people like Matt Frewer. He is Max Headroom. He created that. He invented most of his own dialogue, for crying out loud. We were not as good as he was at doing his own dialogue.
Oh, he would go crazy, and he would start to get nuts. We had an outtake reel that was just vile.
Wow,
I would love to see that.
Words out of my mouth.
Yeah. So would somebody's attorney, I'm sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
But you know, but the whole point about you know this article, when they interviewed me for this article, I turned to them and it says so in here. I said, "Form does not follow function here." You know, it was really key. You got to watch out where the stuff's coming from out of the writers, and then you got to kind of go, "Holy shit, that's what they want to do." Okay, I mean, there was a wonderful sequence. I remember there was a character sitting in an old warehouse down next to the harbor, Long Beach. And I can't remember what it was for, but I remember him talking about the key into the flow where Max was very elegant.
Bruno.
And I remember the use of that word to this day. It's part of the dialogue. I don't even remember which show. I remember the set, and I remember what he looked like. But things are very elegant here. This madness of the blanks. In this dystopian communication, this whole communication device through these tubes that this whole society was communicating with, because they were not only receiving, they were able to talk back, just like we are right now.
Yes, another one of those. It's worth pointing out, by the way, that the head of the Blanks, the guy who ran the Blanks, was called Bruno, and he was named after Bruno George, who was a special effects genius.
I kind of guessed, but I didn't know for sure.
Yes. Speaking of contemporary TV, though, I do want to give a shout to the one show that, at least at its best, has, to me, been as close to Max, or is Max for now, and that's Black Mirror, the anthology show from the Brooker, Charlie Brooker. Especially the one of the best pieces of television I've ever seen, called the episode called San Junipero, which starts with, it's set in 1987, and the camera pans by a store window, and there is Max Headroom in it.
Kind of
so
letting you know.
The homage was clear, and it's just a brilliant Max Headroom. In fact, it was the same idea that we used in the Deities episode, uploading people's consciousness into machines because they were either dead or comatose and things like that. So the stuff can be done. It's just trying to get Max. Trying to relaunch Max is an Omaha Beach. A lot of us have washed up on. So
yeah.
Alas,
and it wasn't then, and it would not be now, a case of thinking outside the box. It's a case of not having a box to have to think outside. And there are not too many people who can do that. Finding writers was close to impossible. Mike was instantaneously and obviously so aboard the way of thinking that was required. But a lot of other people, good writers, I might say, were not. George R.R. Martin immediately got it like a flash. And then, of course, he went on to do quite a good little show of his own.
He seems to have worked out okay for him.
Yes, everything did. And his was a unique piece of writing that spoke to this strange world of Max that you had to get your head into, or have it in anyway, or however that comes about. So it would be very difficult to try and recreate this, I think, without that same sensitivity. And that was a transatlantic sensitivity. It was both sides coming together with a concept that needed developing.
And in the midst of all this, I thought of myself as the most fortunate of men, because I was selected as the magician, the man who pulled all the pieces together and pulled the rabbit out of the hat.
Was that your nickname making this? I know everybody had good nicknames on set.
No, he was just known as Frankish.
Well, that was enough,
Yes.
Got the message across.
He didn't just pull rabbits out of hats, I might say. He pulled producers and writers out of pubs.
Yes.
In some cases, one case in desperation.
In some cases, out of the So
yes, absolutely.
But there's this one classic situation of ADs and production people are always complaining about late scripts these days. But it's like when you have issued a call sheet for something you think is going to be shot the next day, and you've got the driver standing by ready to send the sides out to the performers so that they don't have to show up blind, making going, what the am I saying today?
Right.
and I'm sitting in the production office, and you start at 4:00 and no screen, no script. And you call the writer's office, and they've got the machine on. And you leave a message that says, "Hi, I'm sitting here, and I've got 7 actors on the call sheets, and I've got 7 teamsters sitting in my office here, getting ready to receive the scripts, and we're ready to make the sides and get them to go. Give me a buzz back and give me an idea of when I can possibly have these." Then at 5:00, you make another call, and you say, "Please, it's an hour." And at 6:00, you make another call. "Hey guys, yo." And then 7, 8, 9, and finally you're screaming, "You asshole!" And it turns around to about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and the recording records. That's it. I've had it. I'm lighting my first joint.
I still have that microtape, believe it or not.
Yeah, he played it back at the rap party, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, that was right toward the end, just before we were canceled. We were, one of the reasons cancellation in many ways was a mercy, because we were just out of time. We had still an order for 5 or 6 more episodes, and we had 2 scripts, and it was just, I could see disaster looming in terms of just being able to feed the production beast in a timely manner. We were just, I mean, because there were just too many things slowing us down as well.
And it not and we were being slowed down as well by events that were beyond our control too, some which wasn't, some wasn't accidental. But at that particular time, the issue that Brian had had become critical only because we had not got an idea sorted properly for the next episode, and we'd gone off to try and come up with something. And we weren't very far away. I mean, the bar across the road was only a couple of 100 yards. And we were in there creating a new episode, furiously writing things in longhand, going, this will work, we could, and so on. Completely having forgotten that Brian was in a little crisis and needed somebody to help him.
You know, that couldn't happen today because, of course, he'd have gotten us on our cell phones immediately. And
Absolutely. Which is why I never carry one.
It's a good way around it.
But you know, it was really, you know, a grand, because we were such a band of brothers. As a matter of fact, after we shot the first 6 episodes, and I think we went $4 million over budget on the first 6 episodes, and it was no surprise, because, you know, I made sure that Lorimar Production knew what was going on.
Right.
Hello, this is what I'm going to do. Is that okay? I've got to go. I must do this. I have to spend this. This overtime is happening now. Talk to my accountants, please. You want the actual figures, but I'm estimating that approximately. Hello, it's going. The money is going, Eddie. Eddie, you want us to stop? Tell me. You know, and it's not like we were hiding anything. And the communication was very good with Eddie Denault. And he was really, really good to us. He just kind of let us do what we had to do. As a matter of fact, I was getting my car on the lot right there towards the end of the first episodes. You know, we had completed the first 6. And Leslie Moonves walked by, who at the time was head of Lorimar at the time. And I said, well, Leslie, we seem to be doing well on Max, because the numbers were coming in. And he turned to me and he said, yes, but I'm very disappointed in Eddie Denault. Turned around and walked away. I mean, imagine the furniture that was being thrown at each other, you know. Because $4 million is a lot of money.
Right.
especially 1987.
Right.
Yeah. When we came back on and started building because you carry 2 budgets on every series. You carry an amortized budget, which is all the standing sets and everything that you use in every show, and you carry the pattern budget, the individual show budget, and you end up the pattern. Okay, we can do these individual shows for X amount of dollars. And they sent a young gentleman who was a son of an owner to be a supervising producer to help us do what apparently we had failed to do the previous season.
Got it.
And he wasn't successful. No.
There's a reason for that.
Reason I'm not using names.
He had a rather hard time in the writer's end of things, I can tell you. Yes, he was a nice little man, but a bit out of his depth.
But I remember that we were making up all kinds of things. We kept shooting the video from Edison Carter's camera on a standard ENG video camera.
Right.
And the guys would look at the stuff that they were shooting on this, and Wag would go, no, it's too good. It's too good. Tear it apart. Make it, put lines in it, make it, degrade it. And so finally I said, this is costing me too much visual effects time. And so I had one of these little VHS cameras, JVC,
Right.
that kind of looked like a miniature Edison Carter camera. And I said, here, guys, go shoot this one. And they took my little camera out and they shot this little VHS-C camera, came back, and Wag said, oh, yeah, that's the ticket. And so, and I remember, so now I found myself taking my little VHF camera with me to all the set, and they started using it. So I had all these VHS tapes, and I remember we were on the roof of some great building in just a little south of downtown LA, shooting the Zigzag helicopter, which was a big black Dauphin, Alouette Dauphin, Dauphin, the Dauphin, whatever Dauphine, whatever it's called, and the Zigzag people getting on and off the thing. And I got this phone call from Wag saying, we've been canceled. And at the time, Edison Carter was in the set over there shooting with his camera as a prop, and then he came out and they went in with my camera shooting it, and I was on the phone, and I had one of these big, early cell phones,
Right.
and we've been canceled. And just as I was getting that call, this camera swung around and was shooting me leaning up against the wall back there, getting we've been canceled. Wow. And I was going, Wag, what does that mean? He said, we're not shooting tomorrow. We're not just canceled.
Yes, we're
done.
killed.
Yeah.
Mid-episode.
Yeah, mid-episode.
Yeah.
So
I can tell you it was 2 days into an episode I had written about Edison's family called Families.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And yeah, it was a Tuesday in October.
Wow.
Yeah, they pulled the plug on us, and basically it's like if they could have sent a team to terminate us all, I think they might have.
Yes, it wasn't popular.
Well,
But-
I remember what I did at that point was, I turned to the ADs. I think Craig West was the first, and I called him over and I said, "Okay, gather everybody around. Just bring them up to the set, would you please, when you wrap the shot." And it was, I think it was, very close. I think it was the last shot of the movie. I said, "Just bring everybody up." And they all gathered around. So makeup, hair, wardrobe, everybody. Teamsters, I don't give a damn. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, I just got a call from the studio and from Mr. Wag. Unfortunately, we're canceled. And unfortunately, we're not working tomorrow. And I'm letting you know this. I had to do this before 4:30 in the afternoon is what it was. That's what it was, because, because that's the union rule on the day. If you let somebody know before 4:30 that they're not coming in the next day, you don't have to pay them for the next day. And I said, but everybody, I want you to know that I think it's the Players Club was on the
Bottom floor. Yeah.
No,
It's in the basement, wasn't it? Yeah, yeah.
11th floor next door, of the building next door. And I said, there's a very fine bar up there. It's a real old-fashioned, very famous bar. And my credit card will be sitting on the bar. Please join me for a drink. As soon as you wrap your trucks, pack them up, send them off, but come and join me for a drink. And we had a really fine, wonderful late afternoon and evening at the Players Club in downtown Los Angeles, saying goodbye.
And you just recently paid off that credit card bill.
Yeah, and it's the first time in my life I've ever seen grips in tears.
Wow.
Yeah. They were.
It
The whole
seems
company
Yes.
was a kid.
Everybody loved that show. Everyone loved working on it. People used to say, I just love coming to work to do this. This is the stuff. This is why we came into this business. And it was a very proud thing to have done, to actually get case hardened human beings caring about what they're doing in a business which is not renowned for that very often, especially on the ground, when you're having just to turn around and get stuff done, and to hell with the consequences. So it worked at very many levels for everybody who's involved.
Yeah.
Well, we had this wonderful group that were the editors that were preparing all the playback stuff. Were the pre-editors, and they had a set of editing rooms up on the north wall of MGM, and they had a little platform out there where they set up some tables and chairs, and they had these umbrellas made for the chairs that said "Shea Max." And there was this spirit that kind of went on. That was Brian Roberts, I think, who was.
It was Brian, yeah.
Was in charge of that unit. He's gone on to do really magnificent things. And we were shooting 3 per pull down, so no negative was ever made from the 35 that we did. It was all transferred directly to a digital form, and we were editing on the Ediflex, which was a VHS format of cassettes that would go in, and that's how they would edit. It was really archaic in the growth of our industry.
Right.
I mean, we were fighting technology like mad, because it was still it was still steam powered.
Right.
It was digital engines that were still steam powered, and it was very, very difficult at times for anybody to deliver with any efficiency or with any quality. And boy, they worked so hard at it. And taking all of that material into the post group to color correct and design and put it together and time mix, do the color finishing and the sound finishing on this archaic master stuff that was coming in. I mean, I think I still have my old 1-inch masters.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, and this is part of the history, because when this was done in the UK, as I recall, a deeply frustrated editor having a lot of trouble with it was working on 2-inch vacuum machines. I mean, I don't mean cleaning the floor like
Right.
that, but, and you had to keep the vacuum up. So, I mean, it was preposterous. Steam had got nothing on it. It was absurd.
The magic trick here of because I'm watching this at home and I'm thinking wow, this is like computer technology. They're showing me digital things on a screen, and it worked so well as a magic trick for me that even watching it now, I'm pretty impressed with the visuals on screen. It holds up pretty well for a 30-plus-year-old show.
I wish the same could be said for the rest of us.
We are basically at our hour here, and so I don't want to keep you all for very long. But is there anything you want to close with in terms of other memories or things that you wanted to share before we close this?
Well, I just heard some lovely valediction, our last day, and Steve talking about it. I would just say it was a pleasure to be involved. Something I'm more proud of than anything I've ever done in television. And always happy to look back on it and think of it, and I'm pleased to know that it's still out there finding new fans.
Yeah, thanks to you two for your interest and so on too. It's fascinating that something this long ago should still find an audience amongst the bright young things.
Thank you.
Well, it certainly has. I don't know if I shared this, but I recently heard a friend's radio program, and he had some guy from a punk band in California on, and the punk fella said the only show he likes is Max Headroom. Everything else, he does not care about TV. Max Headroom.
He's a blank.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
Yeah, the blank life lives on.
The show was absolutely grand and a magnificent experience. It was a crusade and a challenge, and it was one of those shows where I actually I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and But after I'd gotten to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning every day, and that's what that show was about. And everybody else on the show did the same thing.
True.
We were literally sleeping 4 hours a night, 7 days a week, just to pull it off.
Some of us didn't get that 4 hours, Brian.
Well, you had to be at the pub at some point.
Well, yeah, but
Well, anyway, from the remote areas of the Pacific Northwest and my broom cupboard, I will wish you all goodbye.
Anyway, thank you both, Heather and Austin.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And
thank you
Heather
so
and
much.
Bye now, everybody. Cheers.
And
This has been such a pleasure.
keep the dream alive, Heather and Austin.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
All
Blake
right.
Revolution.
We need you, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. This
Yeah.
has been a true wonderful pleasure and delight. Thank you very much.
You're in upstate New York?
I am indeed.
Ah, which town?
I'm in Rochester.
Oh, Rochester. Ah,
You can tell by the accent. I can't quite stop with those A's.
oh well, you're doing fine.